Some additional settings that we'll want to take a look at are located under the Restrictions tab. By default, when you create a new quiz, it will have the Hide from Users box checked, and it won't have any due date or availability ranges set, so that's something you'll want to do as you create this new quiz. In terms of availability, the start date and the end date will control when a user is able to begin writing the test. In fact, the end date is not the same as the cutoff time. To be clear, this end date only really indicates the last minute, the last moment when a user could start writing the test. There's a separate setting which controls the overall length of time they're allowed for their attempt, and we'll see that down below. Once you've set both the start and end date, I typically feel comfortable unchecking the Hide from Users box. Scrolling down, you do see that there's a timing setting as well. So this is where you would control the overall length of time that a student is allowed for their attempt. You can decide whether you want the system to enforce that time limit or simply put a flag on any attempt that goes over time. If you want that to be enforced, especially if it's not in person, then you would check the enforced time limit. The grace period doesn't actually show up for students on their screen. They don't know that that exists. It's just a bit of a buffer so that they can click the submit button if they've lost track of time. And again, if you really wanted to lock the student from responding any further, you would prevent them from making further changes. If you have to provide accommodations for students, such as a longer length of time, a different start and end date, or even an increased number of attempts, that all happens under the Special Access option. What you would do is you would click Add Users to Special Access, find the student from the list at the bottom of that screen, and then above in the settings area, you would overwrite essentially any of the settings that were required for their accommodations. The Submission Views tab is where you would determine what a student can see after their attempt. So typically, we would not allow students to see their answers, the questions that they answered, and that's for fear of students sharing those with other students who haven't written or future students in upcoming semesters. And those are the options by default. However, if you're setting up a practice quiz, which you can do, these quizzes in eConestoga don't have to be connected to a grade item. If this was a practice quiz and you wanted students to see the answers and wanted them to receive the feedback, you could change the default view and you would indicate that students are allowed to see the questions, and if you were even willing to show them the correct answer, then this quiz became more of an automated feedback tool that didn't record a score for their final calculated grade, but it did give students the ability to learn from their mistakes in this case. And what I'd recommend in that case as well is that you would also allow multiple attempts. And those attempts can be found on the Assessment tab. Again, the default is 1. For a practice test, you might set that to be unlimited.